Have you ever felt shame for being a very sexual woman? Have you ever thought something was wrong with you because folks who looked like you just weren't openly discussing sex? Welcome to Tita's Thots. I'm your host, Trish, and here I will share my thoughts on sex and marriage from a Filipino American female perspective. I think we should start this off by obviously first introducing myself and why this podcast will set itself apart from all of the other sex podcasts out there. There are really a shit ton of podcasts. I know that when I'm searching, there's always so many to fucking look through, and it's overwhelming. So first things first, who am I? My name is Trish. I'm 31. I live in the Bay Area, and I've been married to my husband for about 2 years. We've been together for over a decade. I don't have any kids. I was raised Catholic and no longer practice. And to be honest, I just tend to defy a lot of stereotypes of a Filipino woman. I love to share my opinion all the damn time and talk. I love to connect with people on deeper levels and especially love to talk about sex. What is a tita? Well, if you're not familiar with the Filipino culture, a tita translates to aunt in English. She's usually a blood-related aunt, or oftentimes more than not, she's just a friend of your parents. She kicks it at your parties all the time. She's being annoying. That's how we usually think of our titas. So I've been journeying through my 30s. I've realized that though, of course, I'm still young as fuck, I look young. Shout out to my mom and the Asian/Filipino genes. I'm definitely entering a new stage of my life. My friends are having kids. I'm being asked to attend fucking baby showers and purchase gifts from baby registries. Like, long gone are those days where we would just talk about dating and like hooking up and all the young 20s, early 20s type of shit. Welcome to my fucking 30s, where women are now expected to procreate. And yes, I get asked all the time, having been with my man for over 10 years, like when we're gonna have kids. Don't wanna fucking hear it. I'm busy enjoying our very active sex life for the time being. Thank you very much. So yeah, for now, I'm just a tita. I hope that one day I'll be that tita that my friends' kids would approach to talk about things and normalize conversations around sex. So yeah, that's really the reasoning behind the title of Tita's Thots. Plus, it's fucking catchy because thoughts is spelled T-H-O-T. We all love a good pun. I do for sure. And I really am that hoe over there. And I've learned as I've gotten older to own that shit. I've really learned to embrace it, who I am as a woman, the good and the ugly, and being a very sexual one. And that's fucking okay. So to really set the tone here, you may or may not have already tuned in my trailer. Dope if you have. If not, all good. We'll cover a lot of that here. I want to talk about sex as a married woman. That's really it. When I'm searching for sex podcasts, I notice a lot of the representation tend to be of single women, and usually they're white or black, which is really cool for those groups. It's just regardless, though, of their identity. A lot of the female podcasters are, as I said, single or casually dating, doing all this fun, kinky shit, having like very socially unconventional types of relationships, such as being like poly or they're swingers. But the thing is, a lot of us women are not really always fucking different people. We're not always just on dating apps. A lot of us in our 30s are now either in long-term relationships, engaged, or like myself, fucking married. And oftentimes, though not, of course, always, but often we are monogamous. But monogamous doesn't equal boring. Doesn't mean that we're not kinky or hypersexual or evolving in terms of our taste, our sexuality, and our sex drive. Like, that can fucking change over time. And absolutely, it's normal for it to. There's just clearly a missing perspective in the podcast space when it comes to sex, and I really want to fill that fucking space with my thoughts on it. Not all Asian women are submissive. Though some might be because of culture, that doesn't mean that they want to be. And oftentimes, if we're American, we've been living here for some time, you're first or even second generation, you're probably not going to be like what your mom or grandma was like, right? Like, that makes fucking sense. We live in a different country. Sure, there's absolutely nothing wrong with satisfying your partner and wanting to provide for them and make them feel good. Hell, I make sure my man is satisfied way more than the average husband. Not to brag, but high-key humble brag. It's just that even in porn or your media, Asian women are portrayed so one-dimensional. Even in the films, right? It's like you're either this geeky girl or like the emo girl or like the slutty girl. Sure, we can be really giving. Our culture says to, respect our elders, and be very kind. to others and just be very, good hosts. Like when you come over to an Asian person's house, yeah, we'll have you take your shoes off, but we'll also ask you if you fucking eaten yet. That's just our culture, and that's fucking dope. We can also be alpha females. Hello, like my hand is up because I am very alpha. I'm the black sheep in my family. So without a doubt, you can probably guess that I identify as an alpha female. I have a very high sex drive. I wasn't really taught that that was normal growing up or quote unquote okay. So I'm coming to terms with that as I've gotten older. And guess what? The more I'm speaking with other Asian American women and even especially Filipino women, like that's fucking normal. Like they all can have really high sex drive. But like all my friends seem to, all my female friends, and maybe that's why we're friends, right? Like that's probably something that's bonded a lot of my homegirls and I is because we have that in common. And that's fucking cool. We can be all the things. Let's just fucking embrace it, show it off, and talk about it here on this podcast. Clearly, you can already probably catch a vibe that you can tell I love sex. That's why I'm making this podcast, right? Like in order to start a podcast, you probably have to really fuck with the content that you're going to talk about. Even as a kid, when I wasn't even actually having sex, I was so curious about it, just like any other kid, right? My first experiences with sex, though, weren't from like properly learning about it from my parents. Like any immigrant parents, they weren't really sharing and educating that topic with me. My parents owned a karaoke and video rental store in the 90s and early 2000s. We didn't have like what you would call now porn, because porn obviously has evolved into something way different than what it was at that time. But there was a lot of these like sensual Filipino, like rated X type of films that I used to watch. And they were, looking back now, like so awful, not close to porn. They weren't even softcore porn, like this, what we call in American, like romantic movies with the sex scene, but it's just a lot more of those fake sex scenes. They were really fucking cheesy. But they were the most exciting thing I'd ever seen. And without going too deep into porn, I wasn't really exposed to porn actually until my early 20s. I was actually quite a late bloomer. Like, I didn't know that, right? Like, again, we weren't talking about this. Me and my friends weren't. I would hear like my guy friends talk about it jokingly, but it wasn't something that I really vividly remember being a topic, which means like all my girlfriends and I weren't talking about that. Obviously, having grown up Catholic, like there's a lot of guilt and shame around sex for me. And as mentioned, my parents being Filipino immigrant, like, they're baby boomer generation. Like they're not equipped to talk about that with me. The most my mom really talked to me about sex was how my virginity is so sacred. You don't just give it to anyone. Like, what the fuck? Like, I get that your virginity is important because, in general, who you choose to fucking allow into your body is a big deal. Completely up to you as a woman and very sacred in itself. Sure. But she put this fucking huge emphasis on it that I think kind of fucked with me, to be honest with you. She'd even scar me with these stories about how my dad was like a player back in the day before he married my mom, and how he had one night stand. He would never marry one of those girls because they gave it up so quickly. And hence why he married my mom, because she wasn't that type of girl. Clearly, those types of stories would influence me in how I would develop my own beliefs and ideas around sex and show up even today. So as I started going through puberty, I knew pretty early on that I was boy crazy. I was very much into cuddling. I was always having a boy crush. Probably has a lot to do with some of my abandonment issues and my codependency and attachment style, which is super deep. We're not going to get into that here in this first episode. We'll save that for another time. But finally, a month pretty much before my 13th birthday, my boyfriend, 2 to 3, 4 weeks or something like that, he gave me my first kiss at my best friend's birthday party. I remember thinking, ew, this is my first kiss, and he put his tongue right in my mouth. Looking back at that story, it sounds awful, but I'm probably not the only one with a shitty first kiss story, right? So that same day, he tried and failed miserably, but still tried to finger me in the dark while we were watching a scary movie with about like a dozen of our friends at my best friend's party in her living room. He basically just put his hand inside my jeans, like into my pants, under my panties, and touched that area. I hadn't even used a tampon yet at fucking 12. Nothing's really been in there. Actually, for sure, nothing had at that time. I remember exactly being so freaked out about anything going up in there. Word got around pretty quick. You can imagine I was dubbed all these fucking awful nicknames: Trashy Trish, Trish the Hoe, Finger Trish. I had even some friend draw a finger in my yearbook, like a joke. It was pretty awful. But like any other piece of gossip, my reputation was well known right away, but became super old news by the time I was in high school. So you can imagine though, because of that, I stayed pretty PG-13 throughout my high school years. Like fearful of going too fucking far. I don't want to make my reputation worse. Like everyone already heard so much about me about that one thing. I didn't even do anything really throughout high school. I didn't even see a dick with any of the guys I liked until I lost it to my first long-term boyfriend. I was 17. It was right before senior year. And even that night I lost it. I don't think I was looking at it. It was your typical virginity loss story. It goes in, it's awkward, that's it. Though no regrets, I do wish though I hadn't felt shame and fear around sex those high school years. So where am I now? I've come a really fucking long way from those years of feeling shame and suppressing, my sexuality. I'm married now, so as I've been talking about, I'm very sexually active. Sex comes up pretty much every damn day in my life, whether I'm doing it and enjoying it or talking about it with my friends or my sister or cousins or just talking about it with my husband about things I want to try. Pretty much like everyone I talk to who I'm really close with, if not all, like we could talk about sex and it's something super normal in our day to day. But I'd be lying if I didn't really share how much of a long journey it had been and still is to really, like I said, embrace every part of myself and like my sexuality. I was raised by a mom who didn't really have experience in that, department and didn't have sex till she was married. And my dad would never even talk to me about sex. I don't think he's even said the word sex to me. The probably closest we've ever come to low-key talking about it or coming up in a fucking conversation, he'd cleaned out my room for me. Yes, I know that sounds so fucking spoiled, but I was messy and I was working full time already in community college. So I think he was just at home and one day cleaned my room, whatever. I don't have to explain myself. I know my husband's laughing hearing this story. My dad had organized my nightstand area for me in my room. And my birth control pills were like neatly placed. And he had said to me in Tagalog, "Oh, mabuti yan," which translates to like, "That's good." And that was fucking that. He basically was just telling me like, that's good. In other words, that like I'm, taking protection in my own hands and, making sure that just regardless if I'm sexually active or not, like he's not an idiot, right? Like he was a player. So he's not stupid. I think it was just one of those areas he didn't know how to discuss with me. And so I think he was just happy that I was making sure I was protected in my own way and not just relying on the dude to like use a condom or whatever. So as I continued on my journey with sex, I realized that I've always been kind of the odd one out of my group of friends. I was the only virgin in my limo on the way to junior prom. I can also count how many people I've slept with on one hand. And to be fucking honest, it's not even close to the full hand, y'all. Like, it's on one hand, it's not a full hand. That doesn't really leave a big number for you to guess, but just use your imagination. I believe in you. We say, like, women are either, like, virginal or good girls or sluts and whores. Like, what about most of us? I want to say most of us who are in the middle. Like, my body count isn't high, but I'm also really sexually experienced with my partner, who I've been with for a long time, plus my ex in the past, right? Like I can be very kinky. I've done a lot of stuff. I'm down to try a lot of things. I'm not pretending like, I'm down for anything, but I'm down to at least explore, talk about it and research it and kind of be more informed and see if this is something I would like to try. What about the girl who's married to her first love and is now in the swinging lifestyle, but they're still emotionally very monogamous? What about the couples who've been together for years, like decades, and prioritizing fucking almost every day with or without kids? There are so many stereotypes about married couples, and they say sex gets really boring after a while, or if you've just been together for a long ass time. And sure, I think if you don't put any work into it, like anything in life, it's not going to be amazing, right? Like if you, pretty common fucking sense, like you don't put effort into it, it's not going to be at its highest potential. So what about us women who are making damn sure that that doesn't happen? Sure, there are really dope sex podcasts out there talking about pegging and golden showers and threesomes and foursomes and swapping. And like, I'm here for it. I've listened to a lot of those podcasts, not because like I wanted to compete. Really, it started organically. I was listening to those podcasts because I was looking for podcasts about sex to learn a lot more. We've seen all the porn. We know all the fun things that are out there. You just take a quick Google search. If you're around my age, my demographic, you're a millennial, you probably know a lot about these things. You can just research it and find out about all the different kinks out there. But what about those of us who are kinky and monogamous, having a lot of sex and fun? I'm in that demographic. I want to normalize that demographic and I want to talk about it. So most recently, I knew that there was something else calling me, something beyond my career, beyond being a wife, a sister, a daughter, a friend. It was to start this podcast, to really share my experiences, my worries, my anxieties, my thoughts on sex. I've spent a lot of hours at night on Reddit just researching and reading so many things from other people. I've Google searched things like, is it normal to watch X type of porn? Or is it normal to take this long to orgasm? All the things as a married woman, not for the sake of this podcast at all, but like for myself and for my relationship. And like, again, while I haven't done everything, not even close to it, I'm open to learning about more and talking about it and hearing from other people who have talked about it or experienced it. I think a lot of us women deep down want to explore. There are probably so many different fantasies we've either suppressed or hidden from others, like our partners, or most importantly, ourselves, because we felt like it's not okay. And it's okay to also have felt that or feel that shame, to feel the guilt of thinking about these things, because it's probably defying a lot of what society tells us is, or our culture tells us is okay. It's okay to feel too much or too little or not enough. You know, what's really not okay though for me is feeling like there isn't representation or coverage around that coming from people who look like you or live a lifestyle like you or you identify with. At the end of the day, I'm going to do this damn thing. I'm being vulnerable. I have a full-time job, y'all. Like, I have a career. My family, like I've said, they're Filipino. Majority of them are Catholic. They're pretty conservative. And even the ones who are not conservative, they're not really talking about sex openly. It's just not something that our people in our culture do. Especially not like heterosexual women or women in general. But fuck that. I'm putting myself out there because I wish when I was looking for advice or researching or guidance, representation, or for things to be normalized for me, like I wish that there were people who looked like me who had similar opinions or lifestyles. So now for the good and important shit. How often am I going to post, what to expect, etc.? I'll be uploading every 2 weeks and I'll focus on a topic every episode, of course. This podcast will encompass more than just sex. I mean, sex is dope. We're going to talk about it, but there are a lot of different things that are weaved into the topic of sex. We'll explore different things related to like relationships and marriage, and a few things I'd love to cover are attachment styles, the marriage challenges, self-love, identity, all that stuff, because it all, like I said, intersect with sex. And I think that they're all connected to each other, and it would be an amazing thing for there to be coverage around sex with feelings and not just sex for fun. This, for the most part, will be a solo podcast. However, every 2 to 3 months, maybe more often, but at the very least 2 to 3 months, I'll aim to interview and bring in a guest here to provide more insight beyond my own. A lot of the folks I'll interview or bring on board are folks who inspire me. They've motivated me to talk more about this, to start this podcast. They'll likely be very unapologetic, sexual, just everyday women like myself and you. A huge shout out to my sister, my best friends, and of course, my husband for being a huge source of inspiration. I mean, come on. My husband literally set me up with this podcast station in my office room since I work from home. He made sure that this is something that was very comfortable for me, and it has really pushed me to do this. Without all the dick that he gives me, the orgasms he makes sure I have, this podcast would just be fucking stale, dusty, full of cobwebs like my pussy would have been if he wasn't my man for the past 10 years. And like any end of a podcast, there's always that request for you to follow me on my social media. Please follow my Instagram. My Instagram is at Tita's Thots Podcast, and that's thoughts spelled with a 0 because thoughts apparently is not allowed to be in an Instagram handle, so I had to throw in a 0 in there. So Instagram handle is at Tita's Thots Podcast, thoughts with a 0. And please share this episode with your friends and family. Maybe you know someone who would really fuck with this content. Maybe you know me and you're laughing because you know about maybe some of the experiences I've already shared here, or you're just laughing at me because you're a fucking hater. Like, that's super cool. I'm not here to focus on that. I'm here to really just get my thoughts out there, and I have my eyes on the damn fucking prize, and that's to represent. I welcome any and all of the support, whether it's for the fucking laughs or the high fives. Thank you so much for tuning into this first episode of Tita's Thots Podcast. I'm your host, Trish. I appreciate the support. Take care.